the end of the world. I could feel all this death.
Everything they've built will fall! And from the ashes of their world, we'll build a better one!
This afternoon, killing at least 24 people. This comes after a series of strong quakes devastated parts of Japan this week. Today's quake hit along Ecuador's coastline just before 2 p.m. Hawaii time. The USGS says it had a magnitude of
7.8 magnitude earthquake has rattled coastal towns, and you are seeing the aftermath right here. Look at this video. The moment the quake struck. Let's listen. Just frightening there. The sound of everything rattling inside that supermarket. It keeps getting louder and louder. Now, more than 70 people are dead and nearly 600 are injured.
Rescue crews are scrambling now to look for survivors under the rubble here. And you can see in the video, I think we have it coming up, if not now in a moment, a bridge collapse. Here it is, smashing everything under it. Officials say the death toll is expected to rise. Seismologist Susan Huff joins us now on the phone from Pasadena. In terms of magnitude, tell us the severity of this quake compared to what we saw in Japan last week.
Okay, so this was a 7.8, which is quite a bit bigger than the magnitude 7. For a subduction zone earthquake along the Ring of Fire, it's actually not nearly as bad as the biggest earthquakes can be, but it's still big enough. It was also relatively shallow, which makes the shaking stronger near the surface, unfortunately, where people are living.
I think a lot of people are looking at this, though, Susan, and thinking, okay, we're talking about 3 major earthquakes in a matter of 4 days. Both of these countries part of that Ring of Fire. Do these back-to-back quakes indicate to you any unusual seismic activity?
Yeah, no, there could be a physical link between earthquakes like this that we don't understand, but as far as we understand, there is no physical link.
We just heard it directly from the government of Ecuador just a few moments ago. Ricardo Peña, who is with the Office of Risk Management there, told CNN en Español that the death toll, as you just indicated, has risen to 233. More than 1,500 people injured. And at this point, we're beginning to get more information into what's the area that was the most affected, Becky. And the minister was telling us that Manabí province is probably the most affected area. Just in this province alone, 200 people dead. Again, 233 for the total. He was also saying that the main problem at this point is communication. A lot of communication infrastructure has collapsed. There's a big problem with roads, highways that would provide access for rescue teams to go there. And we're also hearing from a number of different countries, including Colombia, Mexico, Chile, and Spain, that are sending teams there, that are sending supplies to help these people, those victims affected by the earthquake. Mexico and Chile, of course, have had vast experience dealing with these sort of situation. But it is the moment after the catastrophe, Becky, where people are only beginning to realize the extent of the damage and the number of victims. And once again, I want to repeat that number for people who may just be tuning in. It's 233 people dead as a result of this devastating earthquake in Ecuador.
Search for survivors amid deadly earthquakes in Japan. Rescue efforts are underway in the southern region of Kumamoto after two powerful earthquakes struck in 2 days.
At least 32 people were killed. About 1,500 others were injured. And an undetermined number of people are trapped under piles of rubble. Lucy Kraft is in Tokyo with the latest. Lucy, good morning.
Good morning. The latest quake, a magnitude 7.3, struck Kumamoto Prefecture just after midnight local time. 12 Tokai University students in the village of Minami Aso were trapped when their dorm buildings collapsed on them. Rescuers were able to save only 10 of the students. But most of the casualties have been among senior citizens, especially those living in fragile, unreinforced wooden homes. Buildings in rural towns like Mashiki have borne the brunt of the damage. 20,000 self-defense force troops, police, and rescuers have been dispatched in what the government has vowed an all-out effort, racing against time to extract victims trapped in their homes and reach areas cut off because of ruptured and impassable roads. As strong aftershocks continue to destabilize buildings and loosen soil, terrified residents face a new hazard: landslides triggered by rains forecast to continue through tomorrow. We are seeing echoes of the last major quake catastrophe in 2011. Japanese Defense Chief Nakatani says the government is considering an offer of assistance from the U.S. military. Just over 5 years ago, American troops were instrumental in bringing aid and searching for victims in northeastern Japan.
Parts of Mashiki were badly damaged in the first earthquakes. Now, after a second day of tremors, you see destruction literally everywhere. Buildings that were close to collapse have now completely collapsed. We have aftershocks like this one. And they've also been joined by new buildings that are now damaged. What you've also seen after these second day of tremors, is damage to infrastructure like roads and to bridges like this one, which we're now just getting off of. And this is more of a problem further out into the countryside, where damage to bridges and also to tunnels and roads makes it a lot harder to reach isolated communities. At least in this sparsely populated part of Japan, it has meant that casualties have been kept to a minimum. If quakes of this magnitude happened in other more populated parts, the effects would have been disastrous. But that's small comfort for the people who live here and who are going through this.
We'd like to remind you of a story that just came in to us this hour. Mount Aso on Japan's southwestern island of Kyushu erupted at about 9:43 a.m. on Monday. An NHK camera near the volcano caught sight of black smoke rising high above the crater. The meteorological agency is urging people near the mountain to exercise caution. The agency is telling people not to approach the volcano. It has issued an alert level of 3 on a scale of 5. The government has set up an information center at the Prime Minister's office. Once again, Mount Aso in southwestern Japan erupted at around 9:43 a.m. That's about 40 minutes ago. An NHK camera is showing images of thick black smoke rising above the crater. Now, the meteorological agency has issued an alert level of 3 on a scale of 5. It's urging people near the mountain to be cautious. The agency adds people should not go close to the volcano. The government has set up an information center at the Prime Minister's office. We'll be bringing you more details on this story as they come into us. And we'll be back at the top of the hour with more of your news updates.
Let's take a look now at exactly where and how these quakes have struck. You can see many active faults running from south to north and also from east to west in the area. These are the epicenters of the two biggest jolts. Experts initially thought Thursday's magnitude 6.5 quake was the main one, and they expected subsequent tremors would gradually get smaller. But officials at the Meteorological Agency now say Saturday's magnitude 7.3 quake was the primary one, which was 10 times more powerful in intensity than Thursday's tremor. So they say the jolts on Thursday and Friday were just preludes. The epicenters are spreading from west to east, and quakes are now happening in neighboring Oita Prefecture. There are many active faults concentrated in this area crossing the center of Kyushu. Experts call this zone the Beppu-Shimabara Rift Valley. Plates beneath Kyushu are pulling from the north and the south. This plate movement has caused many quakes in the past. Officials at the Geospatial Information Authority of Japan have measured surface displacement using GPS data. They say one point of reference in Minami-Aso has drifted 97 centimeters to the southwest. That's the highest figure so far. The same point also rose by 23 centimeters. Experts warn that strong quakes may occur over a wider area.
400-year-old castle's walls breached after having withstood bombardment and fire in its 4 centuries of existence. The towering wooden entrance gate and hall of Aso Shrine in Kyushu completely collapsed. The shrine has been a place of worship for 1,700 years. It's designated an important cultural property.
That is a rare tornado you were looking at that touched down Friday evening in Uruguay. Now, this is a small town of Dolores, and this tornado was responsible for killing at least 4, but injuring 200 people. Now, this system doesn't frequently happen here, and they certainly do not have the wherewithal of buildings to handle it like we do, or warning systems. Now, this is pretty much a depiction of what happened. The town of Dolores has about 20,000 people, so it's a small town, and this tornado was devastating, as you can see from these pictures. Debris flying catered to many of those injuries, but look how those structures got pretty much demolished with this.
Strong winds that blew across South Korea last night left their mark in various corners of the nation. On the southern resort island of Jeju, more than 280 flights were grounded last night before things got back to normal this morning. In the southern port city of Busan, powerful winds accompanied by 77 millimeters of rain capsized a boat and swept it 700 meters off course. Makeshift covers at numerous construction sites in Ulsan were flung off, damaging parked vehicles. In the southwest, road signs, signboards, and poles were flung out of place in Jeonju, while airborne garbage cans spread trash all over. Out east in Goryeo, 10 greenhouses had their roofs ripped off, while in Pohang, golf practice facilities were torn apart. And in Incheon, west of Seoul, 13 boats were unable to cast off. The winds reached speeds of up to 20 meters per second in some places and are still blowing off the eastern coast.
Even before the storm really arrives, DIA was trying to get people out or telling them they're going to have to wait until it's all over. Denver 7's Jacqueline Allen is at DIA tonight. Jacqueline, more than half of tomorrow's flights are already canceled.
That's right. You know, you can see here right now a lot of passengers are here late into the night. They were supposed to fly out tomorrow, most of them, and they're here right now, just fingers crossed, hoping they can get some kind of flight out to get anywhere tonight. Now, in all, the airport has announced that there are 678 flight cancellations tomorrow. That is 57% of the daily schedule. Now, to give you an idea of the impact, I checked, and there were supposed to be more than 130,000 passengers coming in and out of DIA tomorrow alone. Many passengers we talked to late tonight say they're doing anything they can to get out while they can.
Because we were scared we weren't going to be able to get out tomorrow. So we decided to come tonight to see if we can get on a flight.
You don't have a lot of hope?
I have zero hope.
We miss home, and we've been here a week, so, and we're ready to go home.
And you can see here on the board a lot of flights are canceled, and most airlines are offering to waive those change fees so that people can change their flights for free. But they are warning people here at the airport that tomorrow there could also be delays because of de-icing, and they're telling people to be careful on their drive out here and make sure you check your flight status before you drive all the way out here. Reporting live, Jacqueline Allen,
The
Denver
sprawling
7.
Mekong Delta is in trouble, and so are the Vietnamese farmers who rely on the river for their livelihood. At least 39 hydroelectric dams are being built upstream, mostly in China, to help fuel its industries, and that's taking a hit on the water levels. The hotter and drier weather due to the El Niño weather phenomenon is drying up the water supply as well. The parched land is allowing seawater to seep inland, worsening the situation. Now, crops won't grow and the shrimps are dying. This is bad news for the country's economy, which relies on exports of such commodities. Some farmers are being forced to take other jobs to pay back loans. Others are selling their land. China has said it will release more water to help Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries lacking water. But the help can't come fast enough to the once fertile delta.
Peut-être appeler la police, ça, non?
The people that were voting on delegates were party regulars, and our base mostly is not party regulars. You know, I mean, we draw independents, Democrats, people that haven't voted before. You know, so it wasn't that we didn't understand it, it's that we understood it too well and understanding that it was set up for us to lose. If there is, you know, voter fraud or misconduct on the part of the party, that does open up that delegate slate to being challenged in the Credential Committee. So, I mean, that's basically our goal now. We're collecting data from every state, not just Colorado, on voter fraud and on voter disenfranchisement.
The average Joe like me cannot compete even as a national delegate because I can't spend $50,000 in just a 40-day process caucus to make my vote count. I just can't do it. And neither can all these people out here.
This is America, and we've always had a voice, and we've always been different, and we've always been free, and the people always thought that their voice would be heard, and it's just not true in Colorado.
I could have gone to state, but I figured why even bother since it's the only thing he can do really is cry foul now. There's nothing else left to do but protest. The votes have been cast, it's all said and done.
police fired tear gas at the anti-government protesters in Cairo on a day when some protesters are angered by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's decision to hand over 2 islands to Saudi Arabia this Straits. Now, traffic was brought to a standstill as protesters and police played cat and mouse in the heart of the capital. The protest started off peacefully on Friday morning with people carrying placards. At least 50 protesters were arrested after the protest turned chaotic. The protesters are angered by a government announcement that it signed over the uninhabited Red Sea islands of Tiran and Sanafir to Saudi Arabia during a state visit by the Saudi monarch last week. Saudi and Egyptian officials said the islands belonged to the kingdom and were only under Egyptian control because Saudi Arabia had asked Cairo in 1950 to protect them.
Stunning news today on the front page of the New York Times. Pulitzer Prize winner Mark Mazzetti reports that Saudi Arabia has told the U.S. government that it will sell off hundreds of billions of dollars worth of American assets held by the kingdom if our Congress passes a bill that would allow the Saudi government to be held responsible for the attacks on September 11. The article states that the Obama administration has been lobbying members of Congress on the side of the Saudis. And this news comes just 4 days before President Obama travels to Saudi Arabia. It raises a concern that I have often spoken about, an inexcusable lack of transparency. Here's what you need to know. The 2004 report of the 9/11 Commission concluded that there was, quote, no evidence that the Saudi government as an institution or senior Saudi officials individually funded the organization of the 9/11 plot. But 2 9/11 Commission members, former Senator Bob Kerrey and former Navy Secretary John Lehman, have both told me on my radio program that the commission did not exonerate Saudi Arabia. And before the work of the 9/11 Commission, there was a 2002 joint congressional inquiry into the attacks, which were perpetrated by 19 hijackers, 15 of whom were Saudis, as was the mastermind Osama bin Laden. 28 pages from that report have never been publicly released, and some who've read them say that they cite evidence that Saudi officials living in the United States played a key role in the plot. The allegation is that a Saudi government agent named Omar al-Bayoumi provided assistance to 9/11 hijackers Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Midhar. President Obama has long promised to unseal these documents, but he hasn't, and that's a disgrace. Never forget, that's the refrain we often repeat with regard to the events of September 11. But until there's full disclosure and total transparency about what occurred, the words are an empty promise that are made to the victims and their families.
And North Korea appears to have started its reprocessing campaign at its main nuclear site. US-based North Korea monitoring website 38 North says recent satellite imagery shows new developments at the Yongbyon nuclear center, indicating that the regime has already begun or plans to start reprocessing additional plutonium for nuclear weapons. You're looking at the satellite imagery there. Now, this activity consists of the presence of a loaded railroad flat car at the radiochemical lab, excavation alongside a building used to store waste, and excavation work at the reactor's cooling water system. The website says its conclusion is consistent with a recent statement by US Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, in which he said North Korea could begin to recover plutonium from the reactor's spent fuel within a matter of weeks to months.
Another earthquake to report this morning, the third quake in 3 days along what's known as the Ring of Fire. The 6.1 magnitude quake shook the Pacific island of Tonga. This happened around 7:30 at night their time, just after midnight our time. So 3 quakes again in 3 days, once again in Tonga, Japan, and then last night in Ecuador.